"No one wants you here," my sister said. My guardians nodded in agreement. I didn't argue, just packed my bags. This morning, my phone was blowing up with 15 missed calls. 22M. Never thought I'd be writing this. But here I am at 3 a.m., staring at my phone screen with 15 missed calls from numbers I haven't seen in 3 years. Let me take you back to where this all started. My parents died in a car accident when I was 15. My sister Emma was 19 then, already in college, and our aunt and uncle became our legal guardians. They were decent people, or so I thought, but they made it clear from day one that I was the burden they never asked for. Emma was the golden child, studying pre-med, beautiful, popular, everything they wanted in a daughter. I was just the awkward younger brother who reminded everyone of the tragedy that brought us together. The house always felt different when I walked into a room. Conversations would stop mid-sentence, and I'd catch these looks between my aunt, uncle, and Emma. They weren't subtle about it. Family dinners became exercises in exclusion where they discuss Emma's achievements, her boyfriend, her future plans, while I sat there pushing food around my plate like furniture. I tried to fit in. I really did. I joined the debate team, got decent grades, even helped around the house without being asked. Nothing worked. The invisible wall between us only grew thicker with each passing month. My aunt would sigh whenever I asked for anything, school supplies, permission to hang out with friends, even basic things like new clothes when I outgrew what I had. My uncle would grunt acknowledgments when I tried to share something about my day, then immediately turn his attention back to his newspaper or phone. Emma was the worst part. She'd act sweet when others were around, playing the caring older sister role perfectly. But when we were alone, the mask came off. She'd make comments about how I was draining our guardians' resources, how I should be grateful they even kept me instead of letting me go into foster care. She had this way of making me feel like an intruder in what should have been my home too. The breaking point came during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to a decent state university with a partial scholarship. I was excited. Finally, something good was happening. I thought maybe this would change how they saw me, prove that I wasn't just dead weight. I walked into the living room where they were all sitting together, discussing Emma's medical school applications. I announced my acceptance, holding up the letter like it was a trophy. The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. My aunt looked at my uncle, who looked at Emma, and then Emma looked at me with this expression I'll never forget. Not anger, not disappointment, just cold indifference. She told me no one wanted me here. Just like that, matter of fact, like she was commenting on the weather. She said I'd been a burden long enough, that it was time I learned to stand on my own feet instead of expecting handouts from people who'd already done more than enough. My aunt and uncle didn't say a word, but their silence spoke volumes. They just sat there, nodding along with every word that came out of her mouth. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, waiting for someone to contradict her, to say she'd gone too far. Nobody did. My uncle finally spoke up, saying maybe it was time I started thinking about my future more seriously, that college was expensive, and they'd already stretched themselves thin supporting 2 kids who weren't even theirs. I didn't argue. What was the point? I'd spent 3 years trying to earn my place in this family, and it was clear I never would. I went upstairs, pulled out the old duffel bag I'd arrived with, and started packing. They didn't try to stop me. They didn't even come upstairs to check on me. I had about $800 saved from my part-time job at the local grocery store. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get me started somewhere else. I left that night while they were asleep, took a Greyhound bus to the city where my university was located, and never looked back. The next 3 years were the hardest of my life, but also the most rewarding. I worked 2 jobs while going to school full-time, overnight security at a warehouse and weekend shifts at a restaurant. I lived in the cheapest apartment I could find, ate ramen noodles more days than I care to remember, and wore the same 3 outfits in rotation until they fell apart. But I made it work. I had to. There was no safety net, no family to call when things got tough, no one to bail me out when I couldn't make rent. Every semester was a battle to scrape together tuition money. Every month was a careful calculation of which bills I could afford to pay late. I learned to fix my own car, cook my own meals, handle my own problems. College wasn't just about getting a degree for me. It was about proving something to myself. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that surprised even me. I majored in computer science, spent countless hours in the lab, and graduated summa cum laude. More importantly, I landed a job at a tech startup before I even walked across the stage. The company was small but growing fast, and I was hungry in a way that impressed my boss. While other new hires were figuring out work-life balance, I was putting in 60-hour weeks and volunteering for every challenging project that came up. I had something to prove, not just to my family, but to myself. Within 6 months, I'd been promoted twice. Within a year, I was leading my own team. The startup got acquired by a major tech company, and suddenly my stock options were worth more money than I'd ever imagined having. By my second year out of college, I was making 6 figures and had been headhunted by 3 different companies. I bought a nice apartment in the city, got a decent car, started building the life I'd always wanted. But the best part wasn't the money or the success. It was the confidence that came with knowing I'd done it all myself. Every achievement felt earned in a way I don't think it would have if I'd had family support to fall back on. I never reached out to them. Not once in 3 years. I didn't send Christmas cards, didn't call on birthdays, didn't update them on my life. As far as I was concerned, they'd made their choice that night when Emma told me nobody wanted me there. I was just respecting their wishes. Then this morning happened. I woke up to 15 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, but the area code was familiar. It was home. My first instinct was to delete them all and go about my day, but curiosity got the better of me. I called back one of the numbers. It was my aunt, and she sounded different, smaller somehow, less sure of herself than I remembered. She told me Emma was getting married next month, and they wanted me to come to the wedding. She said they'd been trying to find me for weeks, that Emma specifically requested I be there. I almost laughed. After 3 years of complete silence, they wanted me to show up and play happy family for Emma's big day. I asked my aunt why they thought I'd want to be there, given how our last conversation had gone. She got quiet for a moment, then said things had been said in anger that maybe shouldn't have been said. Maybe shouldn't have been said. Not that they were wrong, not that they were sorry, just that maybe they shouldn't have been said. I could feel that old familiar anger rising in my chest, the same feeling I'd had that night when I packed my bags. But then she said something that caught my attention. She mentioned that Emma's fiancé was from a wealthy family, that the wedding was going to be this big, expensive affair, and that Emma had been bragging to everyone about how successful her little brother had become. Apparently, she'd been telling people I was some kind of tech genius, making it sound like she'd always been supportive of my career. That's when it clicked. They didn't want me there because they missed me or because they'd realized they'd treated me badly. They wanted me there because Emma needed me to look good in front of her new in-laws. I was supposed to be her successful little brother, proof that she came from a good family that produced high achievers. I told my aunt I'd think about it and hung up, but I'd already made my decision. I spent the rest of the day making arrangements. I took time off work, booked a flight home, and started planning. If Emma wanted her successful little brother at her wedding, she was going to get him, just not in the way she expected. Update 1. I flew back home 2 days before the wedding. The town looked exactly the same, like it had been frozen in time since I left. I checked into the nicest hotel in the area, a place that would have been unimaginably expensive for the 18-year-old kid who left on a Greyhound bus 3 years ago. I'd done my research. Emma's fiancé came from old money. His family owned a chain of successful restaurants across the state. The wedding was being held at the country club, with over 200 guests expected. Emma had apparently been planning this for months, and from what I could gather through social media stalking, she'd been presenting herself as coming from a stable, supportive family. The rehearsal dinner was the night before the wedding. I wasn't invited, obviously, but I made sure to be seen around town. I went to the grocery store where I used to work, wearing a suit that cost more than I used to make in a month. My old manager barely recognized me, but when she did, word spread fast. Small towns are like that. I had dinner at the nicest restaurant in town, the one my family used to go to for special occasions back when my parents were alive. I made sure to tip generously and chat with the staff. By the time I left, half the town knew I was back, and they were all talking about how different I looked, how successful I seemed. The wedding was at 2 in the afternoon. I showed up at exactly 1:45, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit with Italian leather shoes. I looked good, and I knew it. More importantly, I looked successful in a way that would be impossible to ignore. The moment I walked into the country club, conversation stopped. I could see people nudging each other, pointing in my direction, whispering. My aunt spotted me first, and the look on her face was priceless: surprise, confusion, and something that might have been pride if I didn't know better. Emma was in the bridal suite, but word of my arrival reached her quickly. She came out to see me, still in her robe with her hair half done, and for a moment, she looked exactly like the sister I remembered from childhood, before everything went wrong. She hugged me like we were close, like the last 3 years hadn't happened, like she hadn't been the one to tell me nobody wanted me there. She told me how glad she was that I came, how much it meant to her to have her little brother at her wedding. She introduced me to her bridesmaids as her successful tech executive brother, the one she'd always been so proud of. I played along. I smiled, made small talk, let her show me off to anyone who would listen. Her future mother-in-law was particularly interested in my career, asking detailed questions about my company and my role. I could see Emma beaming as I described my work, like she was personally responsible for my success. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give her that. Emma looked stunning. Her fiancé seemed genuinely happy, and for a moment, I almost felt bad about what I was planning to do. Almost. But then came the reception, and Emma's maid of honor gave a speech about how lucky Emma was to have such a supportive family, how her aunt and uncle had raised her and her brother with such love and care after their parents died. She talked about what a close-knit family they were, how they'd always been there for each other through thick and thin. I sat at the family table, listening to this fairy tale version of our family history, watching my aunt and uncle nod along like they believed it themselves. Emma was glowing, completely caught up in the fantasy she'd created. That's when I knew it was time. Update 2. When they called for family speeches, I wasn't on the list. But I stood up anyway, tapping my champagne glass with my knife until the room fell silent. Emma looked surprised but pleased, her successful little brother wanting to say a few words about his beloved sister. I started with the standard stuff. I talked about how beautiful Emma looked, how happy I was for her and her new husband, how marriage was a wonderful thing. The room was eating it up, especially Emma's new in-laws, who were beaming at this articulate, well-dressed young man who was clearly devoted to his sister. Then I shifted gears. I talked about family, about what it really means to support each other through difficult times. I mentioned how some families stick together no matter what, while others make it clear that some members are more welcome than others. The room was still with me, but I could see Emma starting to look nervous. I told them about the night I left home. I didn't name names, didn't point fingers, just told the story exactly as it happened. I described being told that nobody wanted me there, being encouraged to leave by the very people who were supposed to be my family. I talked about packing my bags at 18 and leaving with nothing but $800 and a bus ticket. The room had gone completely silent. I could see Emma's face going pale, her new husband looking confused, her in-laws exchanging glances. My aunt and uncle were staring at their plates like they wanted to disappear. But I wasn't done. I talked about the last 3 years. I described working 2 jobs while going to school, living on ramen noodles, wearing the same clothes until they fell apart. I talked about graduating summa cum laude with no family there to see it, getting promoted with no one to share the good news with, building a successful career entirely on my own. I made it clear that every achievement, every success, every moment of happiness I'd experienced had been earned without any help from the people sitting at this table. I thanked them, actually thanked them, for teaching me that the only person I could truly depend on was myself. Then I raised my glass and proposed a toast to Emma and her new husband, wishing them a marriage built on honesty, support, and unconditional love. All the things I'd learned were so important by not having them. The silence that followed was deafening. Emma was crying, but not the happy tears you'd expect at a wedding. Her new husband was looking back and forth between us, clearly trying to piece together what had just happened. The in-laws looked like they'd been slapped. I finished my champagne, set down the glass, and walked over to Emma. I hugged her one more time, told her I hoped she'd be happy, and wished her luck with her new family. Then I walked out of the country club and drove straight to the airport. Update 3. I'm back home now, and my phone has been buzzing nonstop for the past week. Emma has called dozens of times, left voicemails that range from angry to pleading to apologetic. My aunt and uncle have reached out too, suddenly very interested in having a relationship with their successful nephew. The best part is the messages I've been getting from other people who were at the wedding. Apparently, my speech has become the talk of the town. Several people have reached out to tell me they had no idea what I'd been through, that they always assumed I was just away at college and then busy with my career. Emma's new mother-in-law called me directly, which was unexpected. She told me she was appalled by what she'd heard, that she'd had no idea Emma came from such a dysfunctional family situation. Apparently, there have been some very uncomfortable conversations in their household about the kind of family Emma was marrying into. The wedding photos tell the whole story. You can see the exact moment when the mood shifted, when people realized what they were hearing. Emma's face in those photos breaks my heart a little, but not enough to make me regret what I did. My aunt left a voicemail yesterday saying they want to make things right, that they realized they made mistakes when I was younger. She said they're proud of what I've accomplished and want to be part of my life going forward. She even mentioned possibly helping me buy a house, like money could somehow erase 3 years of silence. Emma's latest message was different from the others. She didn't try to justify what happened or make excuses. She just said she was sorry, that she'd been young and stupid and jealous of the attention I was getting from our guardians. She said she knew she couldn't take back what she'd said, but she wanted me to know that she'd always regretted it. I almost believed her. Almost. But then I remembered something. After my parents died, there was a life insurance payout, not huge, but enough to help with college expenses for both of us. I never saw a penny of it. When I asked about it once, I was told it had been used for household expenses, for taking care of both of us. I never questioned it because I was just a kid who didn't understand how these things worked. Last week, I hired a lawyer to look into it. Turns out the money was put into a trust fund that was supposed to be split between Emma and me when we turned 18. Emma got her half when she went to college. Mine was never distributed because I'd left home and they claimed they didn't know how to reach me. $53,000. That's what was sitting in an account with my name on it while I was working 2 jobs and eating ramen noodles to get through college. Money that could have changed everything for me. Money that they let me believe didn't exist. I'm not angry anymore. Anger is too small an emotion for what I'm feeling. I'm disappointed, but not surprised. This is exactly who they've always been. People who see family as conditional, love as something that has to be earned, and support as something they can withdraw whenever it's convenient. The lawyer says I can claim the money plus interest. I probably will, not because I need it now, but because it's mine and it always was. More importantly, it's proof that even when they had the chance to help me, even when there was money specifically set aside for my future, they chose not to. I won't be responding to their calls or messages. I won't be attending future family gatherings or trying to rebuild relationships that were never really there in the first place. I learned something important that night 3 years ago when I packed my bags. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. I've built a good life for myself, surrounded by people who chose to be in it rather than people who felt obligated to tolerate me. I have friends who celebrate my successes and support me through failures. I have colleagues who respect my work and mentors who believe in my potential. I have a future that I'm building brick by brick, entirely on my own terms. Emma got her perfect wedding, at least until the speeches started. She got her wealthy husband and her fairy tale story, right up until the moment reality crashed the party. I hope it was worth it. I hope the 3 years of silence, the missed opportunities to make things right, the choice to only reach out when she needed something from me. I hope all of that was worth the few hours of pretending we were a happy family. As for me, I'm done pretending. I'm done hoping for apologies that will never come, or acceptance that was never really offered. I'm done being the family member they only acknowledge when it's convenient for them. I'm 22 years old. I'm successful. I'm happy. And I'm free. That's more than I ever thought I'd have when I was 18 and packing my bags in a house where nobody wanted me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's just living well and letting the people who hurt you see exactly what they lost when they decided you weren't worth keeping around. My phone is still buzzing with missed calls. I think I'll turn it off for a while.